name is Nadine Bernard. I'm with Slow Cook Dreams, and I'm here at in Sackville at their public library here. And today's meal is chicken noodle soup. I chose this one for a couple of reasons. It was probably one of the earlier meals that I found to be really versatile, really easy. Only had 5 ingredients that we typically have something of the sort in our kitchen. And it was the most flexible recipe as well. So just to kind of go through a couple of the ingredients that I have here in front of me. So I bought the box item of the chicken noodle broth, the chicken broth. I brought the box items of chicken broth. It's just easier. It's already diluted. But you can purchase the chicken broth at Walmart. It has 6 in a pack and it's for 99 cents. So cost-wise or convenience, it's up to you. Just for preference for today, I just chose the box items. The noodles that for this particular recipe in a slow cooker, I like the no yolk egg noodles here. And for this recipe, it's a half a bag of it. It calls for 3 medium-sized carrots, 3 stalks of celery, some parsley flakes, and bay leaf. So this is what we're putting all in together today. So I'm going to chop up the celery. So I'm just going to move the couple of ingredients behind me there for a second. So I like to chop the celery to be a little bit thicker than a quarter, like in size. Like if you were to put 2 quarters together, that'll be about the size of it. The celery and the carrots cook pretty fast in the slow cooker. My granddaughter actually cuts this with a butter knife. Trying to get her used to different textures of vegetables to be able to cut. So we started with mushrooms and things that have like a softer texture to them. So moving up to carrots and celery where it's a little bit more of a firmer texture for her to get used to. And she loves it. So for every celery that she cuts, it's a celery that goes into her mouth. So I don't know if that's the general rule for her, but we have fun with it. So, and I'll be saving all the ends, the scraps of all the vegetables, and we'll speak about making your own homemade broth. My grandmother always said that we should have 3 uses to every vegetable. So the 3 uses to your vegetable should be for the ingredient that it goes into a recipe. The second would be to be put into a broth mixture. And then once you boil all the vegetables together to make your broth and you're sifting it through, then the last part would be to use those vegetable scraps for composting. So minimizing waste and having as much use to the vegetables as possible. So carrots are same thing as the celery. You want it to be just a little bit thicker than a like 2 quarters put together. When I first started putting recipes together, I was a widow of 3 young pre-teen children who had appetites like elephants. And so our income had changed at home. A lot of things changed at home. So what I used to have, an $800 a month budget for food, and it drastically changed to $250 a month for food to have to feed the same people. So, I was looking at recipes and looking at cookbooks, and I would look at all these recipes and be really overwhelmed and intimidated by it because they would have like 30 ingredients. And looking at my cupboard and my fridge and my freezer, I didn't have the majority of those things. So growing up with my grandmother and watching her make anything from anything. And if you didn't have something, there was lots of substitutions, or you just learned how to make it without. And they were the most amazing meals. So growing up in a kitchen where I was very comfortable with cooking, on the fly and with everything, I felt that, with this, particular recipe that looks so beautifully fancy in this cookbook, could I make the same thing with less? So I just brought it down to a more real mom's kitchen recipe and said, okay, if this particular chicken noodle recipe calls for 30 different ingredients to make it look as beautiful as it does in that cookbook, how can I make the same thing for my own family with the least amount of ingredients that would still serve the purpose and have a really delicious chicken noodle soup? So that's where, and chicken always seemed to be on sale. Uh, whether it be chicken thighs, chicken breasts, chicken wings, any type of chicken is pretty much on sale on a good rotation. And so a lot of my recipes actually are more chicken based, because it's the more affordable meat on the market. So the chicken noodle soup was the chicken, the celery, the carrot, onion, and parsley and bay leaves. And it's up to you to add the onion or not. I know onion seems to be the most controversial vegetable. Everyone will say, my children don't like onions. And I was that girl too. My kids used to be the fussy eater as well. And then I started to trick them. I would cut the onions to be a lot smaller, and I would cook them beforehand to take out that strong bitterness taste into them, and then I would add it to the recipe. So because they become translucent and really clear, so if you cut them really small, they blend really well and break down really well into the recipe, but you still get the nice flavor that enhances your meal, and the nutritional benefits that come from cooking with onions. So that's my mom trick for those of you that would like to incorporate onions, or for those picky onion eaters. One of the tricks with cooking with the slow cooker is how you kind of place everything into the slow cooker. So rule of thumb is you put the meat item on the bottom first because you want that to cook, and you're using the rest of the ingredients and the fluid to be like an insulation to your meat so that the meat would cook thoroughly through. So that would be the item I would put in first once I'm ready to put everything into the slow cooker. So I would line the bottom with my 4 to 5 chicken thighs, skin on, and I like the chicken thighs with the skin and the bone in for 2 reasons. So one, it really enhances the flavor, and it really draws out a lot of really great flavoring into your chicken noodle recipe. And then once you are ready to add your noodles to it in the end, you can use the bone and the skin once it's removed from the meat, and you can add that to make your own chicken broth. So all the flavoring can come out again. So it's at multi-purposes of food. We always see food now, for one uses, but your food should always have multi-uses to it. So onion is probably one of my least favorite things to cook with, or even to cut. Of all the thousands of people that I have done this workshop with, everybody had some pointers as to how you would not cry, and no one's suggestion has worked yet. So we kind of just have to roll with the punches and go ahead and take the tears that go with it. But there is no substitute for the flavoring that onions give to meals. So I like to cut mine probably as small as possible. Kind of like a small square like this. I line mine one way, and then I flip it over, and then I cut through for the second time. And if I see any that are probably a little bit too big for my liking, I would just go through and cut them again. And sometimes onions can be intimidating to cut just because they have such a, kind of a slippery, slimy outer casing on it. So for me, I like to cut the onion in half and have something where I can put on a nice base here, secure down, and then be able to run through the first time and not feel intimidated by cutting the onion and then just going through the second time so that they would be nice and small. Chicken noodle is a family favorite in our house and probably one of the favorite top 5 recipes that I have in my cookbook. It's easy, it goes far. I've had families add potatoes to the recipe. I've had families add spinach or kale to the recipe too. The great thing about cooking is, and you doing things on your own, is you can have it, fit your family's liking. And all the experiments of adding things to your food, nothing goes wrong. If you don't have parsley on hand, parsley is probably one of the better flavorings for chicken noodle soup. But if you don't have it, Italian seasoning works just as well too. So, most people would have Italian seasoning in their kitchen. And what I like about slow cooking is that, you put everything into the slow cooker and then you can cook it on low for 8 hours. So as you're running out the door, before you're running out the door to go to work or go to school or take the kids to daycare, your slow cooker will be doing all the work for you all day while you're at work or running your errands. So earlier I had cooked the chicken beforehand, just so I can give you an example of the chicken once it's cooked. So before you would add the noodles to it, so I'll be putting the meat on the bottom and having it cook, and then I would add the vegetables to it. And after the 8 hours, I would be removing the chicken from the slow cooker, and then I would just take the skin, separate the skin from the bone, and just have the meat aside, and then just add the meat back to the slow cooker recipe with all the vegetable ingredients. And then you would save the bone and the skin for when you make your chicken broth. And the same thing, you can add the parsley or Italian seasoning and the bay leaf to it. Add 10 cups of water and have that simmer for about 25 to 30 minutes. And then you have your own chicken broth for future recipes and not having to buy 99 cents or $3 boxes every time. They're usually, contain lots of sodium anyway. So this way you get to control the recipe and you get to add what you want to it. So I make, additional batches of my own vegetable broth, my own chicken broth that I have on hand, and I fill them into little Ziploc bags. So I always have 4-cup frozen broth freezer bags in my freezer for future recipes and for me to always have them on hand. I also pre-cut my vegetables on hand. So I, especially like peppers, because peppers kind of fluctuate in prices for things. Celery does, onions. So when I get them on sale, when they're like 99 cents or $1.99, I would take them and I would already pre-cut them and put them into small Ziploc bags and have those frozen too. So say if I wanted to make a chicken noodle soup recipe and I'm majorly crunched for time and I need to have it done, I would just go into my freezer and I would just pick out my already cut carrots, my already cut celery, onions, my chicken broth, take the frozen chicken that I have already packaged into 4 pieces, throw it into the slow cooker, add some water, put it on low, run out the door. So supper is literally done in less than 10 minutes, which is really great. Because some of us are really crunched for time. So chicken breast just happened to be on sale this week. But you can use, I really prefer the chicken thighs. Chicken thighs are, pretty reasonable, even if they're not on sale. So just gonna add in the already cut celery and carrots that we had done, and the onions. So So it's a tablespoon and a half of parsley. One bay leaf. So before you eat the recipe, you would just remove the bay leaf once you're done cooking. So I'm using a 7-quart slow cooker. So this particular recipe here, it could fit into a 4-quart slow cooker, but I'm using a 7-quart slow cooker just so it doesn't fill up so much. But if you don't have a slow cooker, you can do the exact same thing on the stove. So you would cut up all your vegetables all the same, except that you would cook your chicken prior to. So I would cook mine for about a half hour to 35 minutes on a good strong boil. Remove the chicken from, once it's done cooking, removing it from the pot, and do the exact same thing I just showed here, separating the skin and the bone from the meat, and then just returning the meat back to the pot. And then adding the celery and the carrots and the onions to it, your parsley, your bay leaf, your chicken broth, and then let it all cook together. Carrots and celery don't really need a whole lot of time to cook, so they're usually done between 15 to 20 minutes on a nice strong boil together. And then right before you're kind of ready to eat, I would add the noodles to that, and then let it boil for another 20 more minutes. And then right before you're ready to serve it, just remove the bay leaf from the recipe, and then you have your recipe on hand, ready to eat. So now I can put this on the slow cooker now, and I would just put it on low for the next 8 hours, and then let it cook all day. And then once you're ready to serve, you would just add the noodles to it, the broad egg noodles to it, the last 20 minutes, cover it for 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, just remove the cover and kind of stir everything together. And then it's all ready to go. So I'm going to show you a example of a finished product here. And voila, here is your chicken noodle soup recipe. Smells amazing. I love the color. One of the things I had learned, while doing these different cooking workshops is the link of color to your mental and emotional, it's steamed on my glasses. It's the link to your emotional and mental well-being. The smell of the food and the spices that you use, the color, the sight of the food, the tasting of the food, everything is linked to all of your senses. So it's amazing to have something so simple to bring so much, great feeling and positive feelings to you when you're eating and sharing it with your family. When our family had made such an adjustment in our income and still having to feed my growing children, I didn't want to be doing the grilled cheese and the Kraft dinner and the Mr. Noodles because it was cheaper. I wanted to make sure that they were growing kids, they were teenagers, and I wanted to make sure they were fed right and healthy and within my budget. So, and I did make it fit within that $250. I was able to make a healthy, balanced meal for them every day, and whatever was left over for supper, it would be for their lunch for the next day, which worked out really great. So, I grew up in a home where we make these huge, big suppers together, but there would always be leftovers, and that's what we would have for breakfast or for lunch. So, if you're adding a little bit more ingredients to your recipe, then, you always have something for 2 meals. So for a supper and a lunch for the next day. So that is it for our chicken noodle soup recipe, and thank you so much.